Look, the obvious place to talk about Longines and navigation is the adventure room just through here, but I've chosen here because this is the Avigation Big Eye, the original. Very few people have laid eyes on this watch. Now you can see behind it there is the GPHG Revival Prize Award for the modern iteration, which I have, but we're talking about the way that the aviation trope has changed for Longines, and it's changed into this, which is the Spirit, which wants to be your daily watch. It has all the specs, and now we have an increasingly broad amount of choices for those interested in taking this flight with Longines. Let's get into the specs. We've talked a lot about the Longines Spirit over the last, what is it, a year? 18 months since it was launched? I'm not sure, I'll have to check. And this for good reason, because it is an entirely new Longines collection that leverages one part of its history, which is aviation, and takes it to a very modern place. Care of a case design and an overall package that speaks to the modern buyer looking for a lot of bang for not that much buck. Now again, let's talk about this watch from an aesthetic perspective. This one we're looking at right now is the titanium model, and it's in 40mm and 42mm sizes. This one is the 40mm one on my wrist right now, but it's those massive saber-tooth lugs that make it so confusing, because the 40 definitely wears bigger than a 40 in terms of its width, or the way that it sits on the wrist and the way that it sits across the wrist, and the 42 even bigger. So be mindful of that when you're picking your size. Let's talk about some specifics. The movement inside this is represented by the chronometer certification on the dial and those big old 5 stars. Now this is a mechanical self-winding movement. It's a COSC certified movement for Longines. So that 5 stars indicates that this is their premium movement level. And we have what is known by Longines as the caliber L8.4 or the ETA A31.L11. And we have inside that 21 joules, 25,200 vibrations per hour, silicon balance spring, and a power reserve, a very handy power reserve of 72 hours. Of course, the functions of this time-only watch are hours, minutes, and seconds. Now the cases, they're 40 or 42mm in size, but they're both the same thickness, which of course indicates that we have the same movement inside both watches. Titanium case construction. We have some interesting finishes happening here. We have a really beautiful high polished bezel slope, and we have a sort of a lightly brushed bezel top, and then of course we have if you look really closely, we have a somewhat of a radially brushed case and lugs. And there's a lovely liquid polished chamfer to give you a little bit of reflection along the sort of sexy case lines of the watch. It's a screw-in crown. The crystal is a sapphire domed glass with lots and lots of layers of anti-AR, anti-reflective coating on both sides, which means visibility is fantastic in all conditions. And the case back has 6 screws. In terms of the dial, this is what I'd referred to amply and gratuitously as a smoke show, and that's because we have an anthracite color to that dial, but it's sandblasted, which gives it this really lovely textural look to the eye that you can almost feel. We have a satin finished black flange, which is again a nice textural change up, and actually the little notches for the indexes, little diamond notches somewhat into the flange. So again, you're getting a bit of three-dimensionality from the dial there. In terms of the hands, we have superluminova applied hands. We have a lovely red tip to the second hand, which to me adds so much. Like often watches are won and lost in the details, and this little touch of red to this scheme of anthracite and gunmetal and gold is just a total winner. I love it. And of course it refers to some of the most popular watches of all time that have that scheme and a little pop of red in there. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. In terms of water resistance, we do have 100 meters, so this is a real beta contender in terms of any conditions, apart from maybe deep diving. But we have the NATO style fabric, which is pictured on the wrist, which I absolutely love because it's light, it's comfortable, sweat resistant, all seasons. And then we have a titanium bracelet option as well, which has a triple safety folding clasp, and it has this quite nifty push piece opening mechanism. Fair warning though for people that don't like a watch to have a certain amount of heft. On Bracelet, the titanium version of the Spirit is very light. So while that will appeal to many, because in terms of wearability and in terms of comfort, that might be the superior option. For me, this is very light, and it almost feels on the borderline of not there, which can be, again, for some people a wonderful feeling. For me, I don't mind feeling a bit of heft in my watches. So yeah, that's a real subjective attribute to this watch, and one that will either appeal or not. We also have steel versions in a color that is going to basically mark this as a 2021 watch, which is that olive, that mossy green color, which has just been so rampant through releases this year, and for good reason. Now, once again, with this color scheme, we have this really warming effect of the gilt gold, and we have that nice pop of color again in the red tip of the seconds hand, which on closer inspection has a little triangle which tracks around the chapter ring, which tracks just on the edge of the flange. So another nice little thoughtful touch by Longines, with a little pip of superluminova in that diamond on the seconds hand. Now, I would say that my preference for Bracelet for this model in olive, in either 40 or 42, is the leather, because you're getting that sort of green over tan. Everyone knows it's my favorite combination, so it speaks to me very much. But this, again, it brings out those sort of autumnal fall tones of the green and the gold. So for me, the leather is the winner. All the other details are pretty much the same. The dial is different slightly. It's a green sandblasted dial, which again gives it that textuality. It has applied Arabic numerals, superluminova. Everything else is the same. We have the same water resistance, we have the same movement inside. All of these Spirit watches, if you see someone with a Spirit, you know they're rocking the best of Longines technology, because every single Spirit is COSC certified, and they're trumpeting it from the rooftops with that chronometer text on the dial. Why do we keep talking about the Spirit? I'll tell you why. Because Longines only release new collections very, very rarely, number one. So obviously we have to delve into this and see over time how we're feeling about it. We're checking in with the different variations and continually just processing this idea that Longines are updating their aviation heritage with a watch that, as we've discussed before, is a real contender against some of the big hitters in this price category. Yes, we're talking about the Tudor Black Bay. Yes, we're talking about other sort of 5,000K circa one watch contenders. So it's really stamped its mark in that space as a value proposition with extraordinarily good hardware and with some really thoughtful details and some material innovation. So here we have titanium as well as steel, and we do have two sizes which are really in that sweet spot for most people. And hey, guess what? On that point, I left out a very important detail, which is the lug-to-lug dimensions of the watch. I've talked it up a little bit before. It's really not dramatically, it's not a dramatic game changer. We're talking 49mm lug-to-lug on the 40mm version, and it will be a little larger. I don't have my calipers here right now for the 42, but take that into consideration, that we are talking, for example, 49mm versus 47.7 for the Black Bay. So if you have a Black Bay 58 and you're wondering about the difference, we're talking about a millimeter and a bit, but as we all know, it's all in the details, and these little differences can make a difference on the wrist. So in closing, yes, we talk about this watch a lot. Yes, we should. It is a new chapter, a sort of a blazingly modern take on Longines, which incorporates the best of the brand, the history, the quality for the price bracket, and of course those movements that are both robust, reliable and precision movements. It's quite a package. Thanks so much for listening. It's been a long review. That's because we've had a lot to say. So we will talk again soon. Please leave a comment, ask a question. Did I leave out any more vital statistics? It's quite possible. That's part of the charm of Time+Tide. Thanks for listening. See you soon.